That's right. Amen.
Never right.
Okay. Yeah, I can hear you. What about me? I'm good. Chapter 3. Chapter 3. The next morning, I simply accepted a pattern of events that would become the norm, at least while living in the cell next to Edgar Ray Killen. Shortly after 5 a.m., lights on and wake up call all over the speaker. He began initiating conversation. When I didn't respond immediately, I guess he took it as an invitation to talk, because that is what he did, talk. I was again surprised at his superb memory, uses of language, and his speaking skills. He was auctioneer, politician, and preacher all in one, and he was very, very good at combining the three. He was smooth, skilled, and knew human nature almost exquisitely. Good morning, son. I've got Mop bringing hot water as soon as he gets out of his cell from now on. He's on my payroll. Did you get a chance to write out the power of attorney yet? I answered, still in a half-sleep haze. Good morning, Ray. Great on the coffee, and no, I haven't written anything yet. I'll get back with you after breakfast. Well, remember that we have a lot to cover in a short time. I had had a strange night of dreams, to say the least. All of them I knew, brought on by the things Ray had said and my thoughts about them. I had been an adolescent in the 50s and early 60s. A new generation passed that of Ray's. Yes, I was getting a sour taste from the tales and remnants of Ray's generation and its segregationist philosophies. Much of it was totally against my personal belief and the ideals taught me in my religious faith guidelines and beliefs as an American. I thought much of the bishop whom I met 30 years ago, a man the same age as Ray. He is still my best and longest friend, my mentor and father figure of my adult life. He visited me in several prisons, supported and written to me regularly. He had started and built the coastal Catholic diocese of Biloxi, Mississippi in the 60s and 70s. He had never allowed color to be an issue, though he is black and faced extreme racial discrimination. He remains my best friend, a father, a true father of God and stepfather to me. His loyalty to me had been only seconds to that of my mother. His diocese territory had included many of the South Mississippi counties in which all of these racial issues had transpired. It was odd that such opposite of men and belief had come up through his common time frame in history and had heard so drastically different effects on people and society in general. The bishop was in charge of dozens of churches and Catholic schools and in control of multi-million-dollar budgets, and 90% of his membership would be white. He held the ultimate leadership role over Southern Mississippi Catholic parishioners' religion, yet he had left alone and lived alone and always used the principle of equality preached to heal the racial scars and issues left by previous generations when confronted with them. I had concluded that the main reason for his success was that he advocated Christianity and the love of Jesus Christ. He was very wise and used the utmost diplomacy, but was in no way a politician. He loved all as if color was transparent, and he forgave all. He did his all to help rebuild a coast which had been damaged and left with a legacy of racial prejudices. I envisioned his surprise when learning from my letters that his self-adopted son, was writing a novel about one of the most celebrated races still alive in America. Ray was now a man convicted of killing 3 very young men because of their color, politics, and religious belief. He was accused of being the man who held one of the most violent racist groups of criminals in the United States history, and now possibly the most hated person alive. All of this and much more weighed in on my thinking and decisions. I thought my year in a Mexican prison and the beatings and torments I'd suffered simply because of being a different nationality other than Latino. I knew about being in the despised minority, that of being a convict felon, of being Caucasian in predominantly black population of prison. I'd been tied to the whipping post and felt the torch of leather as it lashed across my back. Physically and mentally, in my 30 years of the criminal justice system, whips. I sure was no novice to suffering, yet nothing had turned me to hate or the use of violence and live with a permanent anger. I, like anyone punished or tortured, have had some very negative feelings, but I got over them. I was extremely curious about what had made Ray choose the path his life had taken. I wondered if he felt regret or understood the negative effects his life had produced for society, his victim, or their families. I just met Ray and already had a list of things I'd like to know about him. He was offering to answer questions he'd not answered in 40 years. He told me he would give me honest truth as to his involvement in the deaths of the 3 men. I quickly noted that when he had made that statement, he neither indicated guilt or innocence. Did he mean the truth as he saw it? I did feel relaxed talking with Ray. I thought about how he was portrayed, like a Hannibal Lecter type killer, a leader of killers, a man so clever he had outsmarted top government prosecutors, law enforcement investigators, and private groups like the NAACP and the ACLU in their attempt to prosecute him for 3 decades. In addition, he continued his same veneer, seeming to care less about any who opposed him. He had never told on himself or anyone else. There was so much more to him than had surfaced in the media, and I was challenged to see just how much I could discover. I took into account the fact that he had 30 late adult years of wisdom and living experience that I did, and had completed law training equivalent to that of a skilled attorney, judge, and politician. I knew that my feelings and opinion made no difference in telling Ray's story, and that I would have to keep my beliefs and philosophies out of it. I could question and debate issues with him in order to get a foundation and thorough explanation from him. I wondered where he would draw the line with me. I would not draw any line or stopping point when I questioned him. I decided on a good way to start a conversation with him and add another question onto the list I had for him. This new question I added was, if he believed in the U.S. Constitution and in the Holy Bible, where it said all men are created equally and in God's image, and referred him to Genesis 1:26, I knew his reputed actions of past prove against these fundamental rights and laws I was looking forward to how he would address the question. I reached through the steel bars and tossed him a Reader's Digest with pages of my questions enclosed. Ray, there's some more questions. Write me some answers. I'll do the power of attorney, and then after breakfast we'll talk. Could you write down a page-sized plot of your central message for the book so I'll know where you are coming from, of what you want to tell the world if you only had 1 page to do it in? Well, he started to reply. Ray, before I talk anymore, I'll need your answer to my first question written down. I want to know how you got the copy of my novel in as much detail as possible, names and all. I drank hot coffee, followed 30 minutes later by breakfast. At 7:30, I folded my learning bag into a pillow-type seat. took it, pads and pencil to the front of my cell. I sat down and got comfortable, ready to spend some hours working. I looked through the gap between the bars at the side of my door. I could see Ray's white sock feet at the door under the cell door. He was sitting there waiting on me, probably impatiently. Being wanted was an interesting experience and new to me, a rather long forgotten. Ray, can you hear me? I asked, adding my voice to the white noise buzz around me. Sure, I hear you fine. Can you hear me okay? The large fan was running. Several conversations added a mumbling type low chatter. Steel doors banged, opened and closed. Commodes flushed and the sounds of daily life caused us to speak at high volume. Could you toss me the answers I asked for? I saw a book, a paperback, slide through the bars of the cell, folded paper between its pages and a rubber band around it. His arm followed, swinging outside his door, much like warming up for an underarm toss. The book fell inches from my hand, which I held at the floor in front of my cell. I grabbed it and began reading the answers he had provided. I started with his answer, which I had not yet figured out in my own mind, to the questions about my previous book. There's an Aryan brother here named Devil, who's the ranking leader of the Aryan brothers on both his unit and the old one behind me. I know you don't think much of him, but because and the old one behind it, because you just don't know him. Why he's the way he is. Anyway, back when you were writing Echoes of Injustice, you had mentioned his introducing you to Emil Lupert, the trustee that you hired to make your copies was a brother of ours. He was reading the book as you gave him parts of it to copy. He made a copy for Devil, who was his leader. Devil came back here doing electrical work and brought the copy to me, more or less showing off. He, as all of the true white brothers here, consider me the grandpa of the movement, therefore they're like their leader. When I read it, I knew it was a miracle. I'd asked God for a miracle, a way to have one more chance to put the message out. You're the answer to my prayers. I read no further from his pages of written answers. That could come later. I began asking them questions. What do you want me to tell the world, Ray? What's your message in brief? Act like I'm one of those reporters or journalists, look into the TV camera, smile and tell me like it is. Here's your chance. Son, first thing I'd say is God had one son. His name was Jesus Christ. He was crucified, died, and buried. And on the third day, he arose and ascended into heaven. Anyone that doesn't believe that is going to hell. The Jews killed him, and he was one of them. They've denied him and still do. The Jews oppose Christianity, its righteousness, goodness, and its holy scriptures, and all who believe in them. They are enemies of Christianity and have been from its beginnings. Ray had not hesitated in responding. He spoke clearly and with an air of authority and preciseness. He was in high form in his presentation of words, and I knew he had said them countless times before. It was a mixture of speech and sermon tied into one, using correlation to the point he was emphasizing. The brief looks I got his face showed the same emotion to match his emphasis of word, a real pro, and he was just warming up. I took detailed notes in my personalized shorthand. The Jews go by the communist philosophy of Karl Marx in his book, The Communist Manifesto. His philosophy is at work in America today. It's hidden under names most Americans believe are for America, like the ACLU, American Civil Liberties Union. Most of whites believe the group stands for white America, as the NAACP, National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, does for niggers. This is probably the biggest lie and fraud ever pulled off on our American citizens by communists than any before in U.S. history. The evidence of this truth is that the ACLU was was started by communist Jews, and has had its membership include them since its beginning. They have supported and enacted the litigation which had the Ten Commandments removed from our judicial courthouse and prayer removed from our school. They want no mention of God, not in God we trust on our money. They advocate homosexual lifestyle, gambling, and all vices which one may wish to pervert upon themselves. These are not what our forefathers came here for, or what the great majority of Americans believe in or allow within their moral and value system. Yet this abuse they put on our country, because its laws allows them to write to their opinion, does not make them the voice of America or the voice of true Christian Aryans. People think the word Aryan or white supremacist is used is negative, but why? The blacks have the NAACP, it's Martin Luther King's, Everett Cleveland, Malcolm X, Mandela, and on and on. Why should those who represent the good Christian Caucasian values be slandered? Who has slandered them with names like white supremacists, yet would never call Jesse Jackson a black supremacist, as he leads 1 million blacks in protest to our nation's White House? This slander is just another plot in progress by Jews and communist Jews who own and control the majority of all media. The TV stations and newspapers that we all see daily that influences and directs our decision and belief are filled with lies about whites. More sex, violence, substance abuse, death, and perversion are exposed to our children than ever before in our history of mankind. All done by these people who have tried to destroy decent and good since history began to be recorded. I don't talk fantasy. These are facts that most of us know and live with. Most people don't contend these issues. It's considered politically incorrect or an infringement of another's right to oppose them. All of it is a lie, a sham, and a game to destroy democracy and Christianity. Another Jewish plot, just an expanded one to what they pulled on humanity 2,007 years ago. I've stood up for my country, worked as an agent undercover for our Southern government officials, the Confederates. I had extensive dealing with the FBI, CIA, the Mafia, and other organizations. I stood up for America, no different than Robin Hood did for the abused citizens of his day. He led his men to fight for righteousness, as I do in my fight. My heritage is of a Southern lineage, a South that was raped by Northern carpetbaggers after the Civil War. Our homes and properties were taken. We were in prison. Our women defiled and disgraced. My father, those I grew up with and admired, did not believe in mixing of the races. I did not believe it proper to see our young white women mixed with black blood, a blood of communists, of Christ killers. I stand firm to these philosophies. I always have and always will. I believe in God and our United States Constitution. I am not fooled by the audacious statements that our country has a war on drugs. Surely the strongest nation on the planet could eliminate drugs entirely within its own borders if it simply chose to. We spend trillions of dollars and forfeit our young soldiers' lives for an oil war, where differences of religion, belief, and freedom of religion are the main issues. America's prison, like the criminal justice system, is filled with users of illegal drugs and addicts. It is the money made from drugs which fuel and allow big government to suck the tax dollars from its citizenship, saying it is in the name of justice. Ha! Justice is truth, and the truths are crack corners. Violence, school shootings, and the reason America is no longer looked up to. So many of our judges in court claim they represent justice, yet, in truth, they mean to stand up against injustice. He hesitated and then said, "Son, that's a few of my basic issues. There is a lot more, and I can prove and validate every detail of what I say. That's enough for now. I'll get Mop to heat up some water. Let's start back after count. I'll tell you about my hero." "Cool, Ray," I replied, ready for a break, and then added a quick question in one word. Were you called, or are you king of the Killen? Yeah, he replied quickly, a frown, anger, and attitude. I didn't want it, but others gave me the title. They gave lots of titles over the past 40 years. That was a great one word, Ray, but it's okay. It will make a book a little longer. I chuckled and smiled. We didn't talk again until after lunch because Ray fell asleep in his wheelchair, still parked close to the front of his cell door. At exactly 1 o'clock, he called me to the door. I lowered myself to my homemade pillow cushion, and without words of greeting, he continued. Son, there wouldn't be no story about me unless much is said about the late and great senator of all our states of Mississippi will ever have, Senator James Oliver Eastland. He headed up the U.S. Judiciary Department for many years, the highest judiciary committee of the United States of America. We grew close together, close friends. He was my guidance, my superior, protector, and mentor. There's many stories I'll tell you about him and many I am sworn by oath to never reveal. And a lot of it was so secret back then, it was classified a top government secret concerning for our nation's security. He did show me how the clique communist Jews were coming into Mississippi and corrupting our blacks, who were still only a few generations past being ignorant slaves. Slaves whom had been long supported with home, food, upkeep, until a war released them from so-called slavery into poverty, homelessness, and without assistance. They, those ACLU commie Jews, came down here and paid them to vote for their communist representative. The two communist Jews and their newly recruited black member who were killed were families of registered communist Jews. We were warned and told of their invasion. They were enemy soldiers. Soldiers died in every war, and they died in America, enemies of our state and nation. If they were white and tried to change history with twisted words and lies and make it a racial issue, all more lies and propaganda from a communist Jew owned and propagandized media. They bought the niggers, made them slaves to the Northern dollar, and indoctrinated them to be soldiers against the South. Many were trained and paid to rape the white women as they told them their ancestors was violated. They would force an integration of South by filling the wombs of our pure white virgin Southern belles with the inferior bloodline of the blacks and create a new and lost generation of half-breeds with heritage of their own. I will prove every detail of these claims as we go. I'll tell you the answers. You can believe that about what was the real soul of the Neshoba County Fairs, about the KKK and the homosexual Jim Hood, our illustrious state attorney general. They think it will all end with me, but my death will be a new beginning for all of the millions of good and pure-blooded areas around the nation and world who keep up with me. Son, I'm giving you a story that will probably go down in history. He paused and I quickly interrupted. Mr. Ray, I decided that I'll give you 100 written questions and get written responses from you. This will authenticate that if I write your book and story, the story itself will include your responses. I am thinking that maybe I will include the questions and direct responses in a second section. A third section will be photographs of you during your lifetime, never before release, which will further authenticate your book. I'm going to start researching the internet, court records, and your past media coverage so that I can find the question you never answered. Ray, I need to find out with proof of the truth of your involvement. I am not going to write lies, fictions, or fantasy. If I continue and you back out, I will finish it without you and tell that you backed out. I need you to get an updated sentence sheet of yours from your case manager. I want to see all your trial and appeal paperwork. All the information about your life needs to be in the story. I'll give you 5 to 10 questions daily, and you'll need to answer them in detail. No more dodging questions. It all comes out this time. The answer seemed earnest and sincere. His answer seemed earnest and sincere, very appreciatively. Let's do it, son. Let's do it. And give him hell. I spent hours and work into the night organizing myself to do this major size project. I emptied the folders, combining them with others so that I could use the file folder for Ray's story. I relabeled 3 folders Ray. I did a mental walkthrough of everything that had transpired in my life since the time it started being affected by Ray. Knowing it would all be used in the story, I thought about what I was learning about him, the man, the person. Edgar Ray Killen was definitely a very intelligent man, uncannily so in some aspects. He was especially alert for a man 84 years old, even though he had had someone working on his appeal in here and his family trying to get his appeal bond reinstated. I felt it was most probable that he would spend the rest of his life here, most probably right there in the cell he was in next to mine. It was a horrible, terrible place for anyone to spend their last years and die. That saddened me deeply. Yet Ray was a strong man in this respect. He did not seem concerned about the real pains of such negative and poor condition, and he had no fear of man in any respect. He knew his situation and handled it as would a seasoned convict or one prepared for suffering or death. I had no doubt he was 100% sure all he said or believed and would die happily in defense of them. Each time that I was able to see his eyes, I was amazed by the strong pull that seemed to exert on me. I never seen eyes with such depth and thought, the word hypnotic to best describe them. It would be interesting to have one-on-one, eye-to-eye conversation. I knew that time would come soon. It was common knowledge to me that Ray's trial had been a miscarriage of justice, or better described, that a justice had been served to Ray that was predetermined and arranged. I followed his trial progress by watching TV and reading the newspaper coverage. There had been no evidence, no eyewitness or confession. He had just come out of the hospital and under close medical supervision. His lawyer was a total sellout to him. I reached through past issues of my Reader's Digest magazine for tips on a journalistic approach to interviewing with a question and answer format. The magazine and its guidance had assisted me to the stage I was a writer. I also copied several names of editors, agents, and publishers I would contact, including this publisher whom had personally replied to my previous letters to them for assistance. This was very encouraging to me and most unusual to have a reply to prison writing. I also ordered dictionary, thesauruses, and the book Prison Writing from their discounted price book list. Prison Legal News provided me with cases and litigation which had helped me to win dozens of appeals and requests for the administrative remedy. I wrote a supply list of the items I would need and I could purchase off the limited canteen offered us in lockdown. Tablets, folders, and legal-size envelopes. I purchased regular ink pens, paper clips, and a pair of stronger reading glasses from our underground servers. I was off to a good start and totally devoted to the project. I read over the authorization and power of attorney that I had given to Ray. He had signed it and returned it without comment. I had chosen to revert it into a sworn jurist document in lieu of having it notarized, which was almost impossible to have done here. It was far from my best work, but was sufficient for its design purpose. Short, direct, and unquestionable. Strangely, the documents felt much heavier than the paper it was written on, a weight of responsibility to me. I knew the issues were vital to many in my state and nation's history. I would probably put it as page 1 of the book as to ensure to a reader of its authenticity. I would follow it with an introductory as a prologue. That would be my next step in the book's production, then a brief chapter outline. I was entering step 1 of a major book project and quite possibly the biggest writing task I'd yet tackled. Ray had on 3 occasions told me he would shock me with his revelations of the past and of things to come. Anticipation and my natural assertiveness were on me. I was ready to be shocked as he had promised me. I would begin to interrogate him early in the morning. I had no idea how long I would be next to him. I had to have at least 100 questions answered in a few weeks to interview him. As I prayed, I asked God for his guidance in at least 30 days with Ray. After all, God in prayer got me through near 3 decades of prison. It could surely get me through Ray Killen. Chapter 4. There were days and nights when Ray and I didn't discuss the book or anything else. Some because of me, some because of him. I was overwhelmed with conversation after my 4th day of communicating with him on and off all day. I had hardly talked at all in the 4-month period prior to meeting Ray. And actually for over 20 years, I had lived as a loner. One morning I woke up and just needed my privacy, to return to my routine, my exercise and silent meditation. I felt a deep aloneness inside of myself because of not exercising myself in soul awareness. I had not been talking to God, who had been my only companion. Instead, I was spending time with Ray. I felt that I had swayed from the center of my life's gravity, and I felt awkward. I spent the day writing a letter, my half of the written conversation I shared with my mother. Her reply would be as she were right here next to me speaking. She and I, hand in hand, the one who had told me, then showed me of God and of mother love for her actions of a lifetime. She once explained to me that Mary, the mother of Christ, set an example of motherly love, which passed on to all mothers, a love only a mother and child can share. She would not accept my praises of her great love, but let me know that it came naturally, passed down through the ages. It's a Jesus thing, and I just got blessed and was lucky to get it, she would explain. It would amaze me that she could love me like that. She and Dad were super fine people, and I, their firstborn, the first son, became the first addict, then the first convict of our family. Yet she repeatedly told me that she is blessed to have such a love for me for 55 years. Though I had lost all the freedom of life and flesh, I'd had more love from this woman than I ever seen given to any other convict. I told her all about my dealings with Edgar's book and asked for her input. I spent the day refocusing, praying, and restoring my inner self. But enough about me. This is Edgar's story. Each of us, maximum security, lockdown, confinement, are supposed to have 1 hour each day outside in the sunlight. Here they meant being put out in the cement floor area in a 6 foot by 15 foot chain link cage. Our area had 5 of the chain link cages, so 5 men could be outside together at one time, each in their own cage, yet able to talk and visit. This was our social interaction. This was not the case for Ray. He was not allowed to social contact, therefore not allowed to be put outside with the other men. When he went out, he was always put out by himself, and I knew that such aloneness is hard on any man. He did not complain of it specifically to me, but I saw and felt it in him. I knew it well and the toll it could put on anyone. Early in 40-degree weather, I had just seen Ray out in the cave, sitting slumped in his wheelchair, alone from his wife and children, from people, society, and all humanity. I knew it was a great burden on him. It was the harshest of punishment and pushed many into suicide. I couldn't get to Ray because he fought and wanted every second of his life. He did not fear death. He truly believed he would have eternity of perfection in heaven. Ray had written grievances and complaints about being kept without social contact, but was always told to was for his protection and to ensure security on the compound. It was easily justified and legal, but I had no doubt whatsoever that it had been orchestrated especially for Ray. I began to wonder if I was part of those lyrics and tunes. On this day, he had begun asking for yard time, telling the guard if he could not let him out to please notify the officer in charge or warden that he must speak to them. To avoid the hassle, Ray was put on in the yard at 9 in the morning. As soon as the guard had returned inside the building, Ray rolled his wheelchair outside of my window. I had been standing and watching him. I was waiting for him, my pad, pen, and cup of coffee on the floor with my prison-made seat. During the minutes I watched him, his interaction with the guard who brought him out, I only saw an old silver-haired man in a wheelchair. It was strange to me that this was the same man whose voice that I had heard so often seemed so young, filled with vitality and almost an adventurous outlook. His inner self and spirit had not aged in this vitality as his body had. From inside my cell, I'd opened the 8-inch window slats, and only a thick wire mesh screen separated us. I could see him perfectly, and even whispering, we could hear each other clearly. He grinned innocent and childlike and whispered, "Son, I bet that warden would be pissed to know I was getting to talk to someone, especially you, who's known for your pen against them." It was sad that he was so lonely and that his link to humanity was me. He was building the natural bond the two convicts in our situation would normally make. I felt this bond and hoped he did also. He was old, disabled, and living with boats, loads of mental and spiritual burdens, and he suffered it all in silence. I replied, sharing his feeling, "Ray, they are probably watching you on a monitor somewhere, filming you suffering and selling the tapes to the companies where they can watch. It's all a game, Ray. They act and must treat you as their boss tells them to. You are a hot topic in Mississippi. They can't abuse you, nor treat you good either. The public sets those rules. I can't blame the warden because he does what he is told to do with you. If the governor or state attorney Jim Hood or Commissioner Epps said get you a color TV or radio or allow you to contact visit, it would happen instantly by legal and pretty normal. Be legal and pretty normal. Yes, I do file complaints and court litigations about the failure of the system. I don't pick on individuals. All people make mistakes, yet it is the same ones you can repair something that is broke. They usually do. If in the judicial system broke, they are not hurt. We spoke of family, life, and ourselves for half an hour. Casual social interaction, a necessity that I now see was basic for Ray's psychic balance. I made notes on all he said. It was my job. Finally, we returned to my question to him. My first question seemed to irritate him. "Ray, tell me about the KKK. You started off sounding just like a reporter. It's the exact question they all ask." "Sorry, Ray, I apologize." Placing my pen and pad on the bed, I just looked at him normally, possibly a slight smile. The silence lasted a few minutes, and then he spoke.
Well, what do you need me to answer while I can still see you in the person? Ray, I don't need you to answer nothing. You asked me to write the book. You and your KKK involvement is a plot already made by itself. You promised me you tell all and then you refuse me and then blame me for doing the job you put me on. It put me on a guilt trip, Ray, like you think I'm prying or being nosy personally. I really don't give a damn. I was in here for checks when those KK men and 100 like them and 1,000 worse then came and then went. Even your 3 killings are not that big of a deal to me. I've slept next to serial killers, cutters, and the worst of them. It's enough work alone to do the book, but I sure won't beg you to tell me what you want written down. That's fair, right, Ray? He answered slowly. Son, I've hidden and kept a lot of things secret for decades, but I'll tell you your answers. What can I tell you about myself? But I'll never hurt any true Christian, Aryan brother, no matter if they are called KKK, white supremacists, or whatever. I can tell you a lot, but not names of those who still fight the cause. I can tell you about a lot, but never on a true Christian Aryan brother, never. When someone was allowed to join the Klan back in my day, the 40s and 50s, they made solemn oaths to secrecy. I helped write those pledges. I swore men in and I enforced them. I have never broken them vows and oaths like most of the rest of them. The Klan was the strength of the righteousness when the law failed. Their purpose was to fight communists, Jewish takeover, and stop the force of integration of our bloodline. We were and are proud of our white ancestry, as no prouder than those who love their black bloodline and heritage. He hesitated and then continued. The Aryan movement is still strong and well underground. The biggest thing the Klan they call them now, the true Caucasian Christian, ever did is still to come real big. Just America needed its George Washington, or the niggers got King and Jackson, or the damn terrorists needed 9/11. The Aryan nation needs this person or events. It will come, son, that I guarantee. I'll tell you more as I can. What's next? Ray was finally opening up, and his emotions were in every word he spoke. I fired away with another question, quicker than Geraldo could. If there's any true solid evidence left of those murders, even your old recruiting records, surely you had a ledger, they say, a little black book. It's funny you asked that. Do you know that during all those investigations with me at the center, I never once had my home or property searched? Figure that one out. After all, the 1964 stuff went down and the FBI showed up, lots of sheets were burnt and evidence destroyed. The gun has never been found, and there's lots of bodies buried in the South which are never reported. I told you I was a circuit preacher. I'd had thousands of names and addresses written in my church record, but who's to know if they belong to the Klan member, as a Klan member? It hardly matters anymore. Most of them are dead now. Still having no firm answers, I tried again. Ray, what was the KKK's purpose? And why did they burn crosses in people's yard? Crosses are holy things. Son, those were just used for a warning folks that the community was aware of something they were doing in violation of the norms of the people. For example, a white woman having a nigger stay over, or a couple of queers getting together of blacks, Jews, or communists moving in and trying to oppose our religions, customs, and lifestyle, everybody couldn't live in a gated community that helped the scum out. So we, the people, made the scum go away. The fire on the cross symbolized the burning away of sin. This is nothing originated, this is nothing originated by the KKK. The Christian armies have done it since Christ's time. A lot of copycat cross burnings happened and got blamed on the Klan. What is the biggest threat to America today? I asked as he paused. He quickly fired back. Anything communist, anti-Christian, or anything that opposed the will and rights of the citizens. What about the blacks? As a race, they are just now coming out of their hang-ups of the era of discrimination, and that generation before them was very evolving out of slavery. The ones before them in Africa were heathens, cannibals, and hadn't raised themselves into an equal and evolutionary state as civilized as the world around them, like Europe and even China, or even Russia did. I look at them now in Africa. That nation has more AIDS, poverty, violence, corruption than any place on earth. They ought to be jumping up and down that their ancestors got to America. It's the only reason they are alive and have citizenship in the United States. They fill the prisons and welfare and unemployment lines and cry when the white man doesn't take care of them. Isn't that a sign of their inferiority? What about Obama, the successful Black American that lots of people care for? They are always the great in any race, but those two both have reason. It's obvious Obama got some good, strong Aryan blood mixed with his own. Oprah's been around whites all her life, lots of white role models. It has all rubbed off on her inside. She's like an Oreo, black on the outside, pure white on the inside. Ray, you said the U.S. government is infiltrated and directed by communist people and money, and they con the public. Tell me the number one way. Easy, the war on drugs. We have millions of pot smokers, millions of addicts, and it takes boatloads of plane trucks running full time to supply even the daily consumption. Every town, big or little, has dope corners, pushers, and gang members. For 40 years, our government says they fight a war on drugs. Yet junkies and users and kids all fill the prison. Not people who had a criminal intent. Look at all the courts backed up. The prison overfull and more drugs coming in than ever. If we can't win a battle without an opposing force of people, how could we win this war 6,000 miles away in Iraq, inside of their own borders? Our judicial and criminal justice system is a failure. Everyone knows none of the prisoners are rehabilitated. They are turned into animals. He stopped, then added, that war does have an enemy. It is the communists and the Jews who profit off of the weaknesses of the white man and his vices. It's the same Jews who will yell about exposing the Klan, yet their secret societies of diamond merchants and bankers are the most secret of society. That's not religion, as they say. Everyone knows of the Jewish faith. We all know that they killed Jesus. It's money with them and their full agenda against any Christian or righteousness. I'll bet you that there are no rich Jews in this prison, and very few rich at all. There's your young equal justice. There's your American equal justice. It's a joke to me. Ray spoke with strained emotion, and his eyes had become like tiny suns, with an intensity that I could not quite describe. I've never seen such eyes, and only on 2 instances seen anything close to being like it. It was as though, as his mouth said words, so did his eyes, also with silent output, which seemed to have an overwhelming hypnotic effect. Rays from Ray. It was phenomenal and something I needed to investigate, maybe try to learn from it. Yet I didn't keep eye-to-eye contact with him yet. My intuition was sending me warnings, and I was listening and on externally alert. I could see that it was raised and taught his belief at an early age, and that had influenced his course of life. As he matured, he followed the segregationist politicians like Thurman Stennis and James Eastland, his lifelong friend and hero. I had no doubt that he had done much for and by the instructions of these men he continually mentioned. Many of those things which the law and court had failed to do for them, Ray carried out and was proud of it. It was looking more like Ray was a go-between and the link between politicians and citizens. He said he would prove that to me, and I believed him in that. With every conversation, more doors opened. I gave him more written questions and received better and more detailed written responses. On these occasions, he referred to himself as King of the Clan and made statements in comparison to Christ as King of the Jews. He definitely compared himself sufferingly in conjunction to Jesus Christ, and he believed wholeheartedly that his life and suffering followed those of Christ. His paranoia of communists and the Jewish infiltration of America was obsessive, and when I confronted him about it, he responded by explaining that he understood why I couldn't see it and that it was invisible to me. The communist Jews had tricked me also. I worked diligently writing the next day, and we would talk back and forth as I asked him questions. For our next talk, I prepared a few good questions that I knew would get to him, but it looked as though I would have to keep pressing him for details. I was determined to get confessions as to his guilt, written and documented for the record, a definite proof of his innocence. As we spoke daily, his claim of uninvolvement and innocence looked to be only of not pulling triggers. Ray had been extensively involved in all of the 1964 Summer of Freedom incidents and much more by his own admission in oral and written words. The following day, around 1 in the afternoon, when Ray was taken outside for the yard, he came straight to my window. He wanted to talk and was more lonely than anything else. Son, how do you stand the aloneness all these years you spent in prison? It's already getting to me bad, real bad. Sometimes I feel like I'm losing it. I'm going crazy. I replied, hoping to help him. Ray, I learned to cope little by little, step by step. A lot of using the AA one day at a time philosophy and approach. Yet never before I had seen such extended length of time given to people in solitary confinement, nor such restriction and deprivation as done here in Mississippi prison. This is a bad place to do time, the worst I've seen. They keep the place looking lily white on its exposed side, but the soul of the place is wretched. I find such a lack of humanitarian here that it is scary to see that workers have sunk to the level to allow it. I've seen the mentally ill abused beyond even my experience in 30 years of doing time. He quickly interjected, son, can't you see yet is how the Jews and the communists want it, and their Karl Marx communist philosophy preach it. It should be obvious with 3 million in prison, 15 million on probation awaiting trial. One day civil war would happen in America. We'll face a few million real mad warriors. Already most of the ones getting cut loose are hardened criminals who've gone through serious abuse. We have a 95% black correction staff, and guess who's controlling them? I tried to ignore the questions. I knew my answers, but the book was not about what I knew or thought. It was the story of Edgar Ray Killen. Son, I want my book to be titled Getting the Last Word In, because that's what it must do. It won't be real long until everyone will know that I meant business. They'll run to my book for the answers, you'll see. While Ray, tell me why they'll do that. You sound as if you have an alternate or combined agenda for the book. Oh, I do. But it's what comes after the book. And I can tell it and spoil an event that will shake up the South, especially my crooked judge and homosexual Jim Hood. I give them all something to bring attention to, the South and our issue. The whole world will know of Edgar Ray Killen, and I'll leave the earth as a martyr for all good Christian Caucasian. My next question referred back to politics and government. You said the government was deeply involved in all of this before the killing of the 3 men. How so? So when you've seen media coverage that said the truth, which was government and court recorded, the Department of Justice had two known communist Jews under full-time observation in Mississippi. The ACLU trained, supported, and paid them. The ACLU receiving government funding, communist and Jewish funding, and soliciting donation from the American public to fund their action. The CIA was involved also. Both agencies were closely supervising law enforcement activities involving the Black civil rights movement all over the South. He stopped and took a deep breath and then continued. Yet all this was twisted into being a racial discriminatory event against blacks about voting rights. There is proof of government involvement and admitted use of FBI hitmen to coerce confession through violence. That story was just in the newspaper. Why did the government dismiss this charge? You know it doesn't add up, and I am the missing link. They don't want their messages interrupted by me anymore. But you can believe I'll get my last word in. It is a known fact that President Johnson started the racial incidents and diversions in the South to take the public eye off of the failures of the Vietnam War. How could any of this not involve or include the government? How do you think I got secret government documents about myself, the other civil rights leaders, and the 2 men coming? It has been the government who directed the press to a direction away from themselves. I wonder why all of that has never been disclosed to the public. I referred to his statement about civil rights leaders. You referred to those other civil rights leaders. Is that what you are? He answered, looking at me, though I was dim-witted. Of course, I was and am the most recognized of any Aryan who fight for the rights of true Southern Caucasian Christians. They did their all to ruin me, to oppose me, and now abuse me until they kill me with this symbolic cross built of concrete and steel. Our conversation was interrupted when one of the guards passed out mail. I received 3 issues of the Sun Herald, and Ray received his subscription, which I believe was the Clarion Ledger from Jackson. He also received several letters. About an hour later, he tapped on the sink and I went to my vent and signaled him back. Son, the article in the Clarion Ledger says that they are once again running an investigation. Buried Secrets is called. My name is listed as the only man convicted. I'll admit that the Homo Attorney General is milking the story for all it's worth. He got thousands of violent suspects awaiting trial. Judges, lawyers, and corporations are deep into corruption. We live in the most backwards justice system, the most inhumane prisons, and a Department of Corrections nigger commissioner who's labeled our state attorney general as a queer to thousands of state law enforcement officers, and he is still into a 1964 mentality in case law. I sure wish I could have got the information to the press on his being caught in a homosexual act at the fair in Neshoba County. Our boys had him under surveillance from the time he stepped on the fairground. They got their 3 pictures that were good enough to prove it. but the guy who took them sold them to that aide who worked for the governor. Got paid $30,000, I think. I guess it was watching out for his boy. I'll bet you Barber gets busted if the feds ever found out about all the money that came his way from Scruggs and Company. You know they are related. The Jew press won't touch that, and it's Pulitzer Prize stuff. Our governor, our politician can't blame old Ray for things 40 years past, but who's to blame for the state's failure since then? The same one who are crying, get Ray, a bunch of damn crooks. Ray, they want the information you are telling me now. There are 6 more suspects alive. You could solve it all, honestly and in a Christian way. Son, everyone knows that they are all guilty. Thousands died, both black and some foreigners. Sheriffs, judges, farmers, doctors, and lawyers did those killings back then. It was just like the old day cattle ranchers hung cow thieves. When the law is not there to defend, then everyday good men become the law. He said nothing else for 10 minutes, then added, the world's got such a misconception of me, just like the movie Mississippi Burning portrayed me. All of us as backwood idiots. And for the record of history, let it be written that the writer and producer of that movie were communist Jews, American hating, Christ killing, homosexual liars. Why don't you check that out? They have brought great curses to their next generation if they are not eliminated in this one. More of the media game on the common people. Right now, let's give the intelligent Aryan proof of my accusation, and I'll write all this down for you. I have attended several different colleges and universities. I got my high school diploma from House High School in Neshoba County. I have a diploma in ship fitting from Ross H. Collins in Meridian, Mississippi. I am a certified forester with 5 certificates. Joe is a certified forester. Joe and I have a few hours of business, but no degree at Mississippi State in Starksville. I have had several courses toward a degree at the Southern Baptist Seminary in New Orleans. I was pastor of the oldest teacher Oates, the Southern Baptist Seminary, Dr. Rufus Langdon. His old home church was in Newton County, Mississippi, and when he retired, I got all of his handwritten notes, boxes and boxes of them. I studied lots of John R. Rice's teaching of the Bible. He was president of Wheaton College in Wheaton, Illinois. Dr. Rice was there when Billy Graham got his degree. I spent quite a bit of time with Dr. Rice. One of my favorite conservative preachers was Adrian Rogers. He was a great Bible teacher and preacher of the gospel, simple and true. Dr. Rogers died in 2006. I majored in agriculture and loved dairy farming, which I followed for 12 years. I was in the lumber business, First Decatur Lumber Company. When I purchased it, I changed the name to Killen Lumber Company. I attended law school but dropped out because of dishonest practices of law by older lawyers. However, the schooling itself taught good and what is right. In my business, the FBI and CIA in the Johnson days meddled with all in any business they could. They were not well liked in Mississippi to my knowledge. The agent would visit banks and tell the president of the bank that if they lent any money, they would cancel the FDIC insurance. Of course, they would have closed the banks. The FBI and CIA would start all kinds of rumors about anyone they did not like. They would point blank lie. Well, I got off the education of history, but I wrote it all down. He added quickly, we grew up fast in lots of ways back then. I was driving by the age of 13, handling a man's responsibilities. I was raised in meetings of our community leaders, and they shaped me. They, all the people now, like Hood, would call them the Violent Clan. For the rest of the evening, he told me stories about Senator Eastland, of hearing FBI tapes at the Pentagon with him, of Martin Luther's famous speech, and things which astounded me, information which I needed written by him so that I could not be writing a book of secondhand talk. It would also go in the book, quoted, but also in his handwriting. Ray gave me dozens of letters he had written, received to read. They came from worldwide supporters. Most used the word Aryan or Christian, and all called him a hero. World and nation Aryan groups wrote him. Most of the Europeans, especially German groups, called him an American prisoner of war, a political prisoner. Some of them had come from Europe to see him, and when he refused at the prison, they went to Mrs. Killen to help her. He did have an extraordinary support group, which was in fact very united and active. They had Ray on many websites. At the end of the day, I was beginning to see much larger and clearer picture of Ray. I saw bits of a Robin Hood and Christ attitude and heavy defiance in defense of his belief. He was always prepared for verbal battle of any kind of one. But his scars and battle wound was showing with his age. The detail of his past would mold the image of the man, and I now fully believe he would make the book of historic relevance. I woke several times during the night because of having confusion and conflicting dreams. Each ended in tragedy. I remember these dreams with total recall. At 3:30 in the morning, I got up from my rack, knelt by its edge, and prayed. I prayed about what I had been thinking about almost all of my awake hours for the past few weeks, the Edgar Ray Killen book. So much of what he told me was contradictory and all so much bigger than I had envisioned. I felt that he believed and loved Christ, but was a proclaimed racist. He hated anyone who was a communist or Jewish and believed that all Negroes were not equal in mental involvement. Ray had proved to me that he believed in segregationist philosophies and had been both an avid student and teacher advocate of them. He was a preacher and a Bible student. He was educated and had worked several careers. He was hated by many and revealed, supported and loved by others. He trusted me enough to tell his life story, but not enough to tell the whole truth about it. His loyalty to friends and associates was admirable, and his devotion to his cause was staggering in its aggressiveness. He used the word Gentile, Jews, communists, Aryan, white, Caucasian, and nigger while claiming not to be a racist, but a segregationist. Personable, likable, and charming would describe one half of his personality. The other half was hateful and venomous. He was able to control his negative side so that at times it could barely be seen, but it was strongly a part of his personality. I prayed that God would direct and guide me and grant me the perseverance to complete his book quickly. This was not an enjoyable project anymore, and I had barely scratched the surface. After I prayed, I felt some relief, and I started my morning normal humming that everything going on my way. Melody. Smiling inside and out. Nothing but prayer and answer prayer kept me going. A half hour later, my moods changed rapidly when Mom slipped me a note when handing me my breakfast tray. The note's message was clear, and I knew it was true. It came from the oldest and most respected active gang leader in the compound. I'd met him 25 years ago at Parchman Farm of the Mississippi State Prison. Then he was called Stone and was the top-ranking gang leader. He'd done time in New York State Prison in the 60s and then was an active member in the original Black Panther movement. Even then, he was known as an enforcer. The role he now lived was of nonviolence, unless necessary. He had been as dedicated as anyone I had seen toward caring for the African American people, especially the younger ones. The gang was then called an organization, and he was devoted to its charter, structure, and purpose. Many times he fought in hand-to-hand battle with fists, shanks, and clubs, like a gladiator to defend his beliefs. He was also a man who lived close to his Christian belief. Tales of his leadership were part of convict legend. I'd seen him fighting back to back as companion with another Parchment legend, Ron Smith, also known as Chino. Ron was a martial arts expert, a marijuana dealer, and a California biker. He was 36 then and had been down about 9 years. Stone and Ron fought 4 young, big, tough black thugs who had come to rob Ron of his marijuana. In less than 1 minute, they had beaten the four to the floor, and then Ron broke 2 of the men's fingers as punishment. They were made to sit on the floor by his rack while the 2 winners doctored and concealed the wounds of the 4. I witnessed this at Camp 29 Parchment. Now Stone was called Papa Stone, a general, and was loved and respected. But the new generation had its own leaders, and he acted only as counselor, mediator, and teacher. I had been the group's paralegal jailhouse lawyer for years. We were friends then as we were today. I read the note slowly. Old school, my brothers, the young bloods, have hot bloods now that the white king is here on the throne. Still their greatest warrior, and now held in bondage of the black king. The young buck strutting, getting smoke signals daily. A note in his handwriting is scary, and the SCR got the ink boy with him. He is the thing right here now. He is their king of the clan. Now it is known he writes his Bible for the world. They hear lots of tales from his home group. The AB disciples, and they await his book. The word out that you, the one playing Shakespeare, and putting it all into a book. They saying you're a part of it all, but I know you just the same old paperback writer. Half of them don't want that book wrote. Half does, and they are throwing sticks on the fire. Now you watch what you eating and back off that door if company comes. You're the target now, least till you take your pen in another direction. Old white boy they call perch pitching, underhanded, got a foot on both sides of the fence, got bent toes about you. Memphis put 3 on you for anything but the grave. He running the stone cold crew. I'm with you, just an old retired senior citizen. It's coming at you now, Stone. I reread it, tore it into small pieces and flushed it. I had thought about the facts that here I would be associated with Ray because of writing his book. I had not fully recognized the effect of Ray's presence upon the racially divided groups. The threat to me personally was unexpected, but wouldn't change anything. I lived in a cell not accessible to most. I didn't believe anyone could open those doors and attack me by surprise or when I was asleep. I felt no fear, but it made me look with serious contemplation of how this book would affect the future of these men and their causes. Since wisdom was needed, I decided it was time for me to enlist my very select and very few free world associates and friends strictly for advice. I spent several hours writing to my pastor and his wife, both pastor of a local ministry I'd been with for many years in Biloxi. They had lost everything in Katrina, home, property, and church building. I considered them to be one of the strongest Christian couples I ever known. Like my parents, they were just regular people whose living style was the walk in Christ that I most admired. My pastor's wife and I had known each other growing up. She was now a highly trained medical health care specialist, and though her husband was the recognized preacher, she was equally in the ministry role. They now were building their new home. They had purchased and now lived in the house I grew up in from my parents. My parents' new home was just a few acres away, but attached to that property. They were like family. They had accepted me into and as a member of that church and fellowship from the day that I wrote them from Florida State Prison nearly 2 decades ago. I wrote them a detailed account of my involvement with Edgar Ray Killen, which was now the central plot of my own life. He was my neighbor, a fellow convict in a tough environment, my only social external human contact, plus all of the rest of his story. It was neat for me to write them because they knew me, therefore knew that I was not for any type of racial discrimination or violence, and that I was going to stand up for my Christian ethics. I included my ideas, thoughts, and mechanical development of the story itself. I was ready for advice and direction, and they had provided me, as they had provided me for several times before. As I wrote these actual words into the now ongoing manuscript, I felt goosebumps running down my side. It was another surreal moment for me as I sat on my steel bed in a maximum security confinement cell. It was easy for me to actually be living in the changes they had inspired in me. Working so many years later, my pastor had taught me lessons upon lessons of integrity and leadership. His wife was the church's mother. I mentioned civil rights, legality, support groups, and some raised allegations and hints toward other acts to follow, as well as chronological history that was developing with his dealing with law enforcement, politicians, and his congregation. I knew that they would discuss, evaluate, and pray about their reply to my query. I'd end up with a real and intelligent Christian viewpoint to include in my own. I was at the point now where I accepted that my own point of view and perspective of this or anything could be severely impaired due to my being a man living as such a recluse from normality and under a full-time restraint to maintain basic survival in such conditions, as was my normal. I never thought I would say, much less write those words. Was I warped? That was the question. I wondered if my being institutionalized would affect the book in any way. There was a response I looked anxiously forward to receiving. I was sure they would give me a more balanced angle to see things from using a moralistic, ethical, and biblical scripture-supported direction. Normally their advice would be so obvious that I just hadn't seen it. My next letter went to my buddy Emil, now free and at present deeply involved in moving into a new home. I nicknamed him Santa, for at first sight, he looked just like a classical Santa, a duplicate in every way. He's soon to be opening his new business and website. I wrote a heading, but it was harshly interrupted. Harsh means normal here. The unit's captain was screaming as he entered the cell block. "Shakedown, stand at the front of your cell." 18 guards crowded in behind him, 2 of them dressed in black, leading 2 canine dope-sniffing German shepherds. "This is a direct order. Go to the front of the cells now." Inside my cell, I had items that would be considered contraband, though I did have them disguised well enough to avoid being detected. There were no hiding places in a small cell, therefore I had learned long ago that most of the time it was the things so blatantly obvious that they were unseen. My contraband was 40 rolled cigarettes, 8 matches, a 4-ounce container of coffee, and about 3 ounces of Elmer's glue that I use in making personalized greeting cards. These were all legal on the compound because they were canteen purchasable items, but were considered contraband in maximum security confinement. Possession of such would result in disciplinary action. Yet for me, it would simply be a big loss of the items. I was already being punished to the maximum of the legal limit of the law by being in solitary confinement. I lived in the exact punishment and condition of the worst in the whole state prison simply because I was classified as an administrative protected custody prisoner. The sergeant who came to my cell was a 12-year veteran of Mississippi Department of Correction, MDOC. He handcuffed me behind my back, reaching through the bars of the cell. He opened the cell door and instructed me to kneel down on the concrete floor right outside the door. I knew this was nothing more than the normal monthly routine shakedown done to each of the maximum security units. I expected to see my property thrown on the floor, he'd inside my cell, around me in the hall. Just the same old prison music. Ray rolled out of his cell in his wheelchair, arguing with a middle-aged black female officer. She looked like somebody's grandmother, or the lady next door. I knew that she'd only worked for the prison for a few months. She was visibly upset and shaken by Ray's outburst. Ray's loudness reached the captain, and she came back up the hallway yelling, "What is your problem now, Ray?" She motioned to the guard and spoke much calmer. "Search his cell per regulation and ignore Killen." She then gave Ray her full attention. "Last time you did this. You destroyed my property and paperwork. They threw all of my belongings on the floor and I can't pick them up from this wheelchair. You and everyone else knows that. You all are treating me this way. You all are discriminating, but deal out. You yell discrimination, but deal out reverse discrimination on the color of the law." The captain looked in Ray's cell and then in mine, then responded to his accusation. "Mr. Killen, your cell is no different from his. My officers are doing good jobs. If you have complaints on past shakedowns or other incidents, please follow procedure. Neither I nor this crew was involved, nor do we wish to be ridiculed for it." Ray continued to complain and argue with her, but was not paid attention to because most of the other convicts were now being louder and disruptive. Several were yelling to see the captain. As I watched Ray go through his normal routine of prison, it was obvious to me that on many occasions what he believed was selective or prejudicial treatment was not such. In fact, I had actually expected to see stricter security in some areas that he was suffering. He was the most recognized racist in the prison system with a violent history and a new prison sentence with the equivalence of the rest of his natural life. On several occasions, I had reminded him that Ray made choices in the past that brought him here to prison and that he continued to advocate those choices in all that he said and did. He wasn't treated differently in the shakedown, yet he really made an issue of it, therefore bringing negative attention to himself. I was learning that this was also status quo for Ray. Confrontation, then arguments, followed by conversation, and below long he would be convincing people of his point of view. This was a repetitious pattern and habit for him. I had stopped him from doing it with me. Even as the shakedown crew left, Ray was raising Cain and characteristically getting the last word in. Most people he would deal with, here would be no competition for him in intelligence, communication skills, or perseverance of cause, including myself to some degree. I was not easily swayed from my beliefs, yet I was cautious in all my contact with him. Ray was probably the most persuasive person I had come in contact with in my years of incarceration and probably in my lifetime. I made several important decisions about the book that day. I would do some drawings and illustrations for it, and then I would reread the transcripts of his trial. Already I found that several of Ray's responses to my questions were exactly like those he'd given in previous trial testimony. Some were actually word for word repetitions. I spent several hours completing what turned out to be an 8-page letter to my good friend Emil in regards to my meeting and agreeing to write Edgar Ray Killen's book. In my letter, I explained to him about how Ray had read the novel Echoes of Injustice, which was about him. Emil had never written a novel, but had worked with me from beginning to end on his book. Emil was a highly educated man, skilled in business management and accounting. At age 76, Emil was both mentor and friend. He looked exactly like Santa Claus, weighing 250 pounds, with light skin and round face. His personality was of a jolly, deeply caring person, yet he seemed naive as to the negative character of other people. Emil had been the first innocent I had ever met in prison. He had served over 30 months of incarceration for bad checks, which were stolen from him and forged by his caretaker family. They had cleansed him out. They had cleaned him out of over $250,000 of his retirement, and even managed to keep stealing his checks for 18 months after he was incarcerated. He was trying to start over from scratch, now on probation, still with the criminal conviction, paying restitution, court costs, and fines for the crimes done to him. Emil Lupert was the worst of victims of a failed criminal justice system. I had done my all to help him, yet still haven't seen the results of fairness of legality. Though I had challenged every official of the court and the Department of Correction with proof of his innocence, no one had listened. He had been charged thousands of dollars for medical disability health care, even though he had been incarcerated. Emil had worked for IBM for 32 years, was a U.S. Army World War II veteran, and was a kind and gentle soul as ever created. His book, Echoes of Injustice, was written, but his story is far from complete. He joked that once his criminal record was cleaned up and the guilty caught, he could write a sequel to his novel. He always told me he would have to be 100 and would remake his lost fortune. He abides in McCown, Mississippi, doing just that. I couldn't help but to think myself ridiculous. Previous to Emil and Ray, I had only written fictional novels, and they had been so easy. Doing biographies and real life stories was quite the opposite. Even if I told the facts precisely, I would be unable to substantiate them, many of them, or be able to make positive results and correction to injustices happen. Though I wrote thousands of pages, sent motions and legal documents to court, letters to all over, in the end I was but a pen and paper from a prison maximum security cell. I was of a minority labeled with a 6-digit number. I focused my life and all that I did now toward Christian ways. I felt that I had rebuilt the defective parts of myself, which were a result of my past extreme substance abuse of painkillers and medication. I was blessed with life, survival, and I had a working mind. The spiritual effects of my personal relationship with Christ were more real than anything I'd imagined. Ray chose me because I professed my faith in God in the novel around Emil. I still do my all to live a Christian life. I failed much, but continue to grow in my Christian development. Most of the past pain was gone, and I was enjoying the clearest consciousness of my years on earth. In the guidelines I set forth for myself, I found conflict with some of the things Ray did and said. He was contradicting his words by what I thought was non-Christian as far as what the Bible told me. Yet he asked me to write of him with full belief in him as would a witness to his cause. On 2 occasions, I pulled out my Bible and discussed God's word with him about these issues of prejudice. He explained his interpretation to me and said I was mistaken in my interpretation. He on several occasions compared himself to biblical prophets, Moses, John the Baptist, and his suffering of those of Jesus. He got uptight because I expressed my belief, and he considered it an invasion into how he saw things. He spoke sharply. It's my story about me, so let's stick to me saying what I need to say. You don't comprehend how important this book is. On the compound, word is out that I am doing a clan book with scripture, the whole works. They are calling me the last king of the clan. Farley, who is the leader of the biggest group of whites here, asked me to name the book the Aryan Bible. He wants me to write out the charter, chain of command, all of it, like the old Klan was set up. Hitler wrote Mein Kampf about his suffering, and now this book you're writing will tell the world of mine. I responded calmly. I'll write your story, getting the last word in, but I will not write an Aryan or segregationist Bible. I will write it, but regard none of its scripture. I already have the scripture I go by. He replied sharply, his voice almost yelling. I know the scripture of the Bible by heart. I preach it. I am a pure bloodline. I proclaim it as the Bible does repeatedly from the bloodlines of the generation of Jesus Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. He seemed so instantly calm himself, then continued, Son, you are a good white Christian brother. I knew it from the novel, but I see it in how you live. I am not going to let this book hurt you or be a reflection of on you in any way. I replied, much pre-thought. I'll not put my name on or in it, Ray. I don't agree with some of the things you said, nor do I condone any actions that are illegal. I keep writing your story to the best of my ability, but I don't write anything that outright perpetuates or instructs a criminal act or civil violation of another person. That statement ended the conversation. I had concluded my last 2 pages of Emil's letter by asking him to do internet searches for everything he could find for me about Edgar Ray Killen and the events of Freedom Summer 1964 in Neshoba County, Mississippi. I asked for his advice and direction of this book project. I wrote the top 2 journalists covering Edgar's trial and the ongoing investigation of 1964 murders. The Clarion Ledger of Jackson, Mississippi was running a monthly story called Buried Secrets, and they requested information on these events. So I wrote to the editor and included copies of some of Edgar's handwritten answers to the questions in the series. Lastly, I decided to write the State Attorney General. I included the 1 page that Ray had written about him for the book and had told me that I could send it to him. Ray had tried to get me to send this information to the media prior to the 2007 election. Ray had tried hard to get me to get his 1-page letter about Jim Hood to the media and his political opponents in the race for state attorney, believing it would cause Hood to lose the race. Ray hated him, and this was only one of the evil ideas he had proposed to me about Hood. I told him I would record all he wanted in the book. I had adamantly refused to help him in his crusade to hurt the ones he wanted to revenge on. This had caused another problem between us, but he let it go and continued to press me to focus on the book rather than his emotional tantrums and requests. Ray gave me permission to include a copy of his authorization for me to write the book to anyone that I wrote for information. No journalist, historian, politician replied, but I continued to pursue advices of the interests of others. True to my back, Babe Biloxi fishing and childhood lessons from Dad, I was casting bait, only these weren't shrimp on gold-colored hooks, but better bait suited for catching the minds of those who had searched for the answers to this part of history. I really needed journalistic advice. I wanted to be given those questions which had not been answered so that I could give them to Ray. He was already in a pattern of evading giving me direct answers to certain questions, so I would rephrase them or rebuild a new set of questions from the responses he provided to me. My list of questions grew faster than he could reply. I counted 31 pages of answers he had already provided. I had another 20 pages of notes from our conversation. If nothing else, I was getting an education about this time in history, Ray's part in it, and the KKK. Ray still professed no personal membership or relationship to the KKK, how it operated. I needed to spend at least 12 hours per day writing and was prepared to discipline myself to the task. I had to file folders, no computer, and no aid. I had stacks of paper on my cell concrete floor. My pen was in 3-inch ink cartridge wrapped in paper to a regular size pen size and secured with rubber bands. I couldn't help but to laugh at myself having the audacity to attempt such a project in this book under these circumstances. Even without added stress it imposed on me, I was already in a continual battle of self-survival. The effects of my lengthy solitude and solitary confinement and the restriction and my negligence to my digestive system had taken a severe toll on me. Many of my days were now spent in an unwarranted type of depression, and I was experiencing psychological changes which added to my worries. I was living on about an 80% liquid diet, heavy on sugar, vitamins, milk, and the few health supplements, drinks I purchased weekly, all coming from within the convict's black market. The mental and physical abuse of 55 years combined with the chronic health problem were causing me to get weaker quickly. I did all I knew to do to keep myself fit. I included an hour of stringent exercise daily. Push. I constantly told myself, beat all the odds which are against me. Publish a good-selling book. Help bring closure to the gaps in my state's history and stop the chain of events from continuing in the future. I continue to have thoughts and plans which I believe to be rational, yet I no longer was a part of a rational world. I ended my daily day on my knees in prayer, as I have done almost every night since my childhood. This is where I get my tank refilled after the long hours drive. I was making all my waking hours. I was a miracle that I existed. It was a miracle that I existed. I gave God full credit. It was a prayer and only prayer that allowed me the contact I needed to keep lucid of mind during the long privations of human contact. God of Spirit was one of the 100% my human companion. Also, there to satisfy my humanistic needs for social interacting. My faith in Jesus Christ was my reason for living, and that was my last thought before sleeping. By 6:30 the next morning, I was rearranging the story by setting up the manuscript online in the chronological order. I decided on a short prologue, then to include every detail of the extraordinary events that Ray put into action in my own life and how it affected me. I started on Ray's personal and family history profile, copying directly in quotes of his written words to more of my questions. I married young and living with my first wife for 55 years. She died at age 70 plus 2 days. She played the piano at the church I pastored. She was diabetic, which destroyed her heart and kidneys before the doctor found the health problem. We had no children. My second wife lost her husband of a heart attack. She had 2 children, a son and a daughter. They each had a daughter. We are very close, bonded family, and my trials made up only closer than ever. Betty Jo and I have been married 10 years on November the 2nd. We have been and are very much in love. There is no secret between us. She visits every visiting day and have not missed a day. Jo had cancer surgery 3 years ago and is now doing fine. She is a very strong lady and Christian. Jo is 12 years younger than me. Her birthday is January 15th and mine is the 17th. I have a foster son that lives in Fulton, Mississippi. He has not missed a visiting day. My stepson is Jerry Edwards. He has a wife, Teresa, and a child. Carol Ann and my wife's daughter divorced and took back her maiden name of Edwards. She has 1 daughter, Katrina. I was interrupted by Mop calling out to me. He hurried down the hallway toward my cell. I had given him several pages of my outline to look at. He was keenly interested in Ray and spent lots of time in front of Ray's cell. He began lecturing me. You can't be putting that Jesus stuff in there about you. That ain't cool. Folks gonna put down on you for that. No writer, don't be telling that. It's personal. He handed me the pages and walked away. Yet, as always, he was true to number 1 himself. Unreal, I thought. The murderers, kidnappers, racial hatred was okay, but for some reason he was extremely concerned by my professional faith. How natural and common he wanted to stay convict socially correct. I continued my work. There were 8 of the Killen children, 6 boys, 6 girls. I am the oldest of these, and JD is the youngest. All are living, but Roy Jean died at the age 64. My 2 sisters had lost their husbands, the oldest at 80 years and the youngest at 60 years. My mother and father are both deceased. Mother at age 80, father at 91. Religious beliefs, church affiliation, Baptist. I pastored churches for 50 years. I am very dogmatic about one thing. Jesus Christ is the only source of being saved. He is the Son of God. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He died for every soul that had ever been or will be on earth. He is the only leader who had come from the grave. He is also still alive today at the right hand of God, the Father. The Holy Bible is the divine living word of God. It is error-free and will be with us throughout eternity. Note YD, I did not say you would have to be a Baptist. I said you would have to have Jesus Christ as your Savior. believing in him only for salvation. I started reviewing several pages of answers he had given me. Questions: how did they treat you here in prison? They took my wheelchair for 10 days. They had heard on TV I could walk. I really thought they were going to kill me. I told them who and what they were. They had a large, about 250-pound black inmate sitting on the floor in one cell that put me in. They forgot that they had not chained him. And when I told him they were black-ass sons of bitches, that the big one come off the floor chanting, "Free Edgar Ray." We ran every one of them out of that cell. They never mentioned that little episode to me again. 2 older officers struck their heads in my hospital room and told me they would help me if I would let them, that they believed in me and the cause, but that had to keep it private. This is about 6 months ago. I was hit on the head. My accident happened. And so I, in May 06, had several hours of surgery. And then May, June, July, and August was spent in University Hospital. They kept me 11 hours in surgery. I developed congestive heart failure. My kidneys had injury, and still they do not know why my blood was so low. They gave me 6 units of blood, and I am now taking medication daily when they bring it in a shot to keep my system from rejecting the pins and steel plates and screws and bone graft. Question: did you file an appeal on your conviction with a lawyer? I feel I have a civil recovery of money lawsuit there. I paid a lawyer $25,000 to do the appeal and represent me on everything. He was to stay on my appeal until I won it. He was to tell my bonds reinstated, never even tried. He was to get my bond reinstated, never even tried. He wrote a 3-page motion once to get me to the University Hospital, but before it went to court, they took me to the hospital. Do you think I have a suit there? On most occasions that I questioned Ray, he answered me with questions about doing his appeal, filing motions, assuming the state private medical provider that the state employed. Though I did offer to look at his trial transcript and suggest I did, he would refuse me, saying that one of his erring brothers was filling it and he didn't want others involved, was filing it and he didn't want others involved. The second page of my question that day was more focused on clearing up rumors from TV and the newspaper articles. I wanted to know how he felt about what was said by the media and how his response written down. During the years, he had refused to answer media questions or any question related to his guilt to any crime or illegal involvement. Question: how did you get introduced to beliefs about blacks? No one influenced me, my feelings toward blacks. I had no hatred toward any race of people. The first census of farmers of the Constitution counted the blacks only 3/5 of a person. Not my words, this is history, and may have been what made America the world's leader. I am German and Irish blood, and all of my ancestors were Protestant, not the Catholic faith I was reared in a criminal home and taught the golden rule. In the state office where people pay fee for birth certificates, the blacks are embezzling most of the cash, and the state is ignoring this stealing. Ray showed me a recent newspaper article about this. Here's where I am: the blacks have taken over the medical clinic, referring to the medical provider Wexford Company, and the doctors and nurses practitioners and very few whites are treated as they need be. I am in a dungeon type cell, B custody, but there by blacks who are prejudiced. Black officers tell the inmates They cannot talk to me when they pass my cell. I have quite a few friends among the inmates who are black, but at least 9 out of 10 officers are very prejudiced toward me and show at all times. I am held to the last to go to the yard call, which is not even 10% of the time, and this right is given by federal court order. I am last to receive trays at mealtime and only given 1/2 a cup of coffee or drink. When I see the officers giving 2 cups to the blacks, I'm always last to get the shower. Sometimes as late as 11 p.m. I will write to you about the attack on me at R&C, where 40 or 50 blacks attacked me and took my wheelchair. Question, what do you think about blacks now? I believe in treating everyone, including blacks, as I wanted to be treated. YD, your questions have me hating and killing blacks. False. These questions sound like the ones the new media asks. Look, the Jewish trader brought the blacks to America and sold them in New York and Massachusetts, also in Boston and South Carolina. The rest of the South was kept out of the slave trading. I started reviewing the last page he had given me, which was actually the first page of questions I had given him upon my arrival. In the first few days, many times Ray would delay giving me answers, but for days, and then mix the ones dated later. Question, what is your full name and prison number? Edgar Ray Killen, number 112906. Question, what did you preach? During the years I pastored out at over a dozen churches, and one of them is why some of my ancestors from Ireland are buried. Question, did you work for Senator Easton, or were you just friends? Did he know you were involved in this civil rights stuff? Were you ever a suspect back then? Yes, I was a suspect, and I was never on Eastland's employee or government payroll. But yes, I worked for him. More in a letter. I spoke all over the place of Mississippi, sponsored by Eastland's backing. More in a letter. This covers 30 years. I never publicly exposed Eastland to the news media. Question, did your lawyer mention your injuries to your trial? In your trial? No. Question, I saw Dr. Walker on TV. I think it was about your appeal bond, talking about your health condition and care. What is up on her? This is a long story, and I have respect for liars. And I have no respect for liars. Question, are you allowed to have your canteen? Have the guards treated you badly? Canteens just when they want to. They curse me with every oath. You can be cursed just so long. Long story will write in a letter. Question, can I start writing media and lawyers and see if I can get you help where you can publish your feelings and story? Yes, please. Question, how is Jim Hood involved? Jim Hood is the Attorney General of Mississippi. He came in with prestige of his office and indicted me in January 2005. He is in the political battle of his life. Some of his neighbors are sending his opponents all they want to get on Hood to use against him. He used Mississippi Burning in his pleading to the jury, a fictitious story as fact. More in the letter. Question, do you have any group, lawyers or individuals who are helping you? Most people do not know what to do. Cell number 10, Tattoo, is doing lots of legal work for me, and I'm afraid to file anything else to trip him up. You know the system. We are working on filing a post-conviction appeal with the state Supreme Court, and then with their decision, we'll go to the federal district court with a habeas corpus. Question, when and why did you get these charges put on you? This is a long story. I was pastoring some of the largest Baptist churches in the area when in 1964 a case happened and the FBI told me if anyone could break the case for them, I could. So when I refused, they offered $8 million. Ha, I ain't no fool. They started paying people to talk. They then, now or ever, at my trial, had any evidence. Just bought testimony. Question, what did you want to add to what you answered today? Hey, brother YD, when I came here, I was a segregationist. Boy, spell that for me. But I'm not prejudiced. I had made speeches that I thought give the last drop of my blood in my body for the privilege to believe what I wanted to believe. However, I will give that same blood for you or anyone else privilege to believe what you want to believe. Is that fair enough? I am here as a political prisoner. I am an extremist about ungodly communist doctrine. It's all began with a communist Russian Jew, Karl Marx. These are the type that lied on Christ and demanded his life to be taken. Jesus could have asked and God would have sent more than 12 legions of angels to rescue him. Aren't you proud he did not ask and then died for you that you could be saved? Jesus came to his own and they received him not. They rejected him. He teaches that the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Hello, brother Gentile. You are now first. Don't believe me, believe the Bible. Aren't you proud? I am pure Aryan blood, German and Irish. All believers in Christ are proud of their godly bloodline. I do not yell, kill Jesus, but I tell the world not to forget about him. The heathen Jews, being the chosen people, not any longer, they throw it away at the foot of the cross and have not until this day asked for forgiveness. Some of the few became Christians, and boy, are they proud of the knowledge of Christ. I got off the subject of prejudice. Today I am prejudiced toward these nigger officers. They started it all on me. I assure you this is a true statement. The inmates are afraid of the officer. The officer is afraid of the convicts. All are afraid of the violent gangs. After reading that, I got up and walked the steps to my sink. Then I tapped 3 times on it. Almost immediately, Ray answered, "Hey son, how are you doing?" I answered with a question. "Mr. Ray, what got you so mad at the guards? From your answer on the question, you seemed mad." He hesitated, then replied, "Son, I'm glad you brought that up because I needed to talk about it. It's a long story, but I'll tell you." "Talk to me, Ray," I replied. "I've surely got the time to listen." I did my best to follow him word for word in the notes I wrote as he talked of events of his past, which now caused him to be so cruelly incarcerated in his twilight years of his life. Well, the whole case had been made into a racial issue, yet 2 of the 3 that were killed were white. White communist Jews, registered as such. We knew the ACLU sent them and knowingly sacrificed them to get the publicity and be in favor with the niggers. They said that sell out president needed to get the public's eye off of Vietnam War. Boy, oh boy, he tricked all the U.S. citizens, but most of the niggers were promised of money equality. But look at them now, all still ignorant, still ruining cities, still selling and doing drugs, still tricking young white girls by putting their inferior seeds in them, making bastard half-breeds. Niggers know they are inferior to whites and any lighter-skinned race. Heck, they all call each other niggers. That's a fact and proof. This prison is run by Christopher F. He calls his own parasites. Yet he runs a prison filled with dope, violence, filth, and run by black gang. His top boy, Holloman, is just another of his nigger do boys. I stopped him and spoke quietly. Mr. Ray, you just called blacks niggers at least 5 times in your reply. Isn't that slander? No, just the truth, he replied in a matter-of-fact statement. The following morning, Ray and I talked to one another, either through the air vents or standing in front of our cell. He passed notes back and forth when not wanting to be overheard. We had started talking while waiting for breakfast. The 20-man confinement cell block had been quiet. After eating, Ray and I were at our cells talking back and forth, whispering quietly. Our heads were only 5 feet apart. I was asking him about questions he had not answered fully or told me about, that we would discuss them or he would write them later on about in detail. Naturally, these were the questions I wanted answered most, and were definitely the ones he avoided most, at least in giving me answers, written answers. As other convicts woke, sinks and commodes operated, and men began talking, Ray and I abandoned conversation, both because we could not hear one another and others would hear. We started writing answers again. I saw that once again I wouldn't get the fully explained reply I sought. Yet many doors of other areas of his life were open, and I would have to be patient and let answers come however they must. Fortunately, Ray talked the guards into giving him an afternoon yard sale, which he spent outside my window talking. He spent an hour and a half answering a single question. He actually told me a story for me to know the man and understand his thinking. These stories allowed me to build a profile and see patterns of his action throughout his life, which did indeed connect him to some of the activities he had always avoided answering or admitted his involvement to. Shockingly, he admitted that he had traveled extensively to Washington repeatedly and had been sponsored by Senator James Eastland. He had heard FBI tapes of Martin Luther King and John F. Kennedy. He knew Richard Nixon and had his help in getting the federal charge against him thrown out of court twice. These were new revelations to me. I started his whole thing with Ray thinking with the impressions of Ray, which I learned 100% from the media, TV, newspapers, and reviews I had read concerning the movie Mississippi Burning. Okay. All right. That'll be good. My voice is waning too. Oh, okay. Very good. All right, then we'll do that. We'll pay it on 85. Okay, why don't we want to run it back to the top of page 85? All right, let's do that. Yeah, 'cause my boys they got the waning on me. Okay. Did you get a lot of more feedback on that? It's getting there. Yeah, you see it. The issue, he tried to get him to admit that he was directly involved in the 3 civil rights murders, but he keep evading him. He keep, going around, talking about others and deflecting it off of the part that he played in it. Yeah, yeah. So that was what was so interesting. How Larry kept going back to I got to get this out of you, Larry. I got to get the truth out of you. And Larry and Edgar kept pushing him out.
Yeah, and then by him doing that, he's coming out with other information about other people and other places and things that he was involved with. It's amazing the way that Larry is pulling it out. Yeah. Okay, then I'm gonna let you go, and I'm gonna stop right here. Let me see if I can stop this thing.